Also watching on Capitol Hill, the confirmation hearing underway for the acting Attorney General, Todd Blanche. Meanwhile, anger and outrage on the Hill as dozens of lawmakers learned former special counsel Jack Smith was secretly reading the content of their personal text messages. Like dozens of lawmakers now. While investigating President Trump 2022, 2023, Senate Judiciary Committee Chair Chuck Grassley announcing plans to drag Smith back before the committee for a public hearing, accusing him of running roughshod over the institution.
Smith's operation cut corners and blew through constitutional stop signs instead of respecting them and having been advised about the constitutional problems. The White House messages obtained and reviewed by Smith's team included communications with many senators and representatives. The communications included messages with members on this committee, including this senator. It also included other information irrelevant to Jack Smith's case against then citizen Trump. Instead of that information being walled off, it was intentionally shared.
All right, now congressional correspondent Bill Melugin, a lot to track today. Let's start with this, Bill. Good morning there.
Bill, good morning to you. As you mentioned, we are learning today that more than 40 members of Congress had their text messages scooped up, collected, and read by former special counsel Jack Smith during his probe of President Trump. And as you can imagine, these lawmakers are not happy about it. Most of them were Republican, but even a few Democrats were caught up in this. So these revelations are coming to us after Senator Chuck Grassley, the chairman of the Senate Judiciary Committee, released these records yesterday, which he says were turned over to his committee by the Department of Justice. Now, those records reveal that 44 lawmakers had their text messages with Trump administration officials in the final weeks of his first presidency collected and read during Jack Smith's probe, and Republicans who are on that list are outraged.
Well, first off, it's outrageous. It's disgusting. It just shows you exactly what the Biden administration was.
I mean, I'm pretty irritated. I was irritated when I knew they were reading the text messages of members. I'm not a lot happier now that I know that it's me.
And some Republicans are now accusing Jack Smith of lying under oath. This is after he said repeatedly during a December deposition with Congress last year that his probe didn't collect text messages.
The toll records that you requested from the senators, did they include the content of the phone calls?
No.
The records that you requested, the toll records from the members of Congress, include the content of text messages?
No.
Well, Senator Rand Paul, who had his text collected, reacted on X, saying in part, quote, December 2025, Jack Smith swore under oath that he didn't spy on text messages belonging to members of Congress. Today, new evidence confirms he spied on dozens of members of Congress, myself included. This is a blatant abuse of power and exactly what our founders warned about. Senator Josh Hawley, who was also on the list, adds, quote, looks like perjury. And back out here live, Bill, two names you wouldn't expect to see on the list who had their text messages collected as well. New Jersey Democratic Senator Cory Booker and former Democratic Congresswoman Karen Bass, who is now the mayor of Los Angeles. We'll send it back to you.
Nearly bipartisan. Bill, thanks. Nice to see you. Bill Melugin on the Hill. Dana's got more.
More on this with Fox News legal analyst Kerri Urbahn. Kerri, so good to see you. What do you think of all of this, and do you think Jack Smith lied?
So I think it's an abuse of prosecutorial power for sure. You know, best case, it was sloppiness. Worst case, it was intentional. And as Chuck Grassley, I thought very aptly said, they just trampled through and steamrolled constitutional protections of sitting members of Congress. You know, look, we have to remember what this is about as far as these text messages are concerned. As part of the Jack Smith probes, they were looking at text messages of White House officials, a lot of them. And when they were looking at those, there were a number of text messages between those officials and members of Congress, which is normal, right? This happens all the time when they're talking about legislation, investigations, and the like. But what it appears that Smith's team didn't do was properly filter out those text messages. So when they received these messages in the first place, which they did lawfully acquire, what they needed to do was take a look and say, okay, wait, we gotta wall those ones off because those are constitutionally protected and they're not relevant to our criminal probes. It appears they didn't do that. In fact, within an hour of receiving these text messages, messages from the archives, they went and downloaded them all and read them. And so these members of Congress have every reason to be very angry. Now, Dana, in answer to your second question about perjury, it really depends on the questions that Jack Smith was asked. I went back and looked myself this morning, and it looks like he was specifically asked about the calls and messages that they themselves requested. So if you recall, there was a lot of anger on Capitol Hill, rightfully so, I would argue, when it turned out that they had subpoenaed phone companies for the toll records of a number of members of Congress and didn't let those members of Congress know. So Smith was asked under oath about those calls that they requested, they subpoenaed. He was not asked, to my knowledge, did you ever review text messages of Congress for any reason? Because if you recall, these text messages were part of the messages that they were reviewing on these White House's official phones. So he would have known, right? But he was slippery and could have said no.
So that's it depends what the meaning of the word is. So
Correct.
That's what it sounds like, Kerri. Kerri, I can make this request, but you don't have to grant it to me. There's someone on the other side who said yes. Who is that?
Well, it was the archives, and these are on government phones, so the archives are supposed to release things that are on government phones, right? And that's what Jack Smith's team did. They asked for these messages from the White House officials. Now, I've always thought that Smith's probe way overdid it. They were looking at messages of Mike Pence, Ivanka Trump, Stephen Miller, Donald Trump, many, many White House officials, in their quest to, I suppose, prove that there was some, large conspiracy to overthrow the government, so to speak, post-January 6th, which on its face I think is ridiculous. And so in doing that, they, requested records of members of Congress, those toll records. Now we know that they were reading text messages that they were not supposed to be reading between White House officials and members.
Yeah.
And look, I think, serious constitutional questions and concerns. And I'm glad, that 92-year-old Chuck Grassley, got to give him credit that he's putting this out and continuing to expose what happened.
And Todd Blanche, the acting attorney general, is having a confirmation hearing today. One of the topics that the Democrats decided to bring up, and we knew they would, was about Jeffrey Epstein. Watch here.
Remember, for 4 years, there wasn't a peep about Jeffrey Epstein. The Biden administration did nothing to be transparent about the Epstein case. When it comes to the victims of this horrible man, we will never not talk to victims. We will never not do everything we can to prosecute anybody that committed any crimes against any of these women. There are no closed investigations. If we learn today, if we learn next week, if we learn next month that there's an individual that we can investigate, indict, and prosecute out of the Epstein files, you better believe it, we will.
This is an issue that continues to bubble up, and the public has not forgotten about it. It's probably one of the reasons it got brought up again today, Kerri.
Yeah, I have so many thoughts on this topic. Not enough time to get into all of them, but I would say this. I think that Todd Blanche should be given a lot of credit for putting those files out. It was a ton of work. They put those, and if you recall, the amount of how fast they did that. Todd Blanche, I would say, has been pushing transparency from the beginning on fraud, on what the Southern Poverty Law Center was up to, on what the Biden administration was up to with respect to parents who were angry at school boards, on people who were pro-life and unfairly targeted by the Biden administration, and now Epstein. And look, at the end of the day, and this is a hard truth, I think, for people to swallow, but it is that Jeffrey Epstein is dead. He died in prison. Now, people were very disappointed, understandably so, that he was not brought to justice in the legal system before his death. And SDNY had been building a very strong case against him. I was at DOJ when Epstein was found dead in his cell, so I remember this very clearly. But, also dying in a prison cell, whether one kills themselves or you want to believe that he was murdered, I think is a pretty, there's something righteous about that in some ways for those victims. Secondly, I would say this, the statute of limitations with respect to sexual crimes, especially if you're a minor, whether it's in New York or in Florida, there really isn't any. So these victims, if they have cases to bring against people who they say were part of Epstein's circle, they can still do that. They can go to the police departments, they can file reports, they can contact their local prosecutors. So there is recourse for these victims, and they should pursue that. And I haven't seen a lot of that, and I think that, that's something that needs to be focused on as well, in addition to what the Justice Department is doing as far as putting those files out there.
Kerri Urbahn, it's so good to have you on the show.
Thank you, Kerri.
And this will continue. We'll be back in touch.
Watching those hearings, too. Be sure to like and subscribe for all the Fox News latest on YouTube and catch full shows streaming now on Fox One.